Hey guys, welcome to Wargame Chat. I'm Dave.
And I'm Len.
Today we're going to go over what makes a good war game. I'll start with the first thing that comes to mind would be a coherent rule book. There are too many war games with rule books that are an absolute disaster, and it just ruins the game. I mean, the game actually might be a good game in the designer's head, but when he put it on paper, it was missing stuff, or it had conflicting rules, or not enough people play tested or whatever. It just destroys the game. So that would be the first thing. I would say a coherent rule book. What about you? What's your first?
Decisions. The more decisions you have to make in the game, the better. Because this is not chess or checkers. You have to make decisions. At the same time, you have to have the right balance of decision making and luck. Because if it's just plain decisions, sometimes you need random events or something to throw things off. Because in real life, sometimes random events throw things off. So you got to have a nice balance between randomness and decisiveness.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you don't have you want to have lots of decisions, but if you don't have any type of randomness, then you're essentially just playing chess, so why bother with the war game? Why not just play chess if you want everything to be just based on decisions only? But my next one, the components have to be usable. In most war games they are. Actually, they've gotten better with war games as far as the quality of components, but there's one problem that I wouldn't say no war game company has addressed, not many have addressed, is some war gamers are either partially colorblind or fully colorblind. And if you're using colors to represent stuff and so on and so forth, the person's colorblind, they just can't tell who this counter belongs to, which side and stuff. In other types of board games, if they want to account for people who are colorblind, if they have something like that's blue and something that's red and something that's yellow, in addition to it being blue, red, and yellow, they'll draw a symbol on it or something to represent what it is, or they might change the shape of the token or whatever. Some people can't tell green U.S. troops from the gray German troops in World War II games, and they have trouble telling whose side each is on, so maybe they should put like a German helmet printed on the counter or something, and on the American side print a star or something, so someone who's colorblind can actually tell the two apart. That would be my second thing.
Well, one thing about components, I know a lot of magazine publishers, and they all are doing this, they're making the counters bigger, because almost always they're 3/8 of an inch, no more of this 1/4 inch stuff.
Or half inch. Yeah, I hated the half-inch counters.
Half inch, or was it 5/8 of an inch. And also they're making them thicker too.
Yeah.
And the numbers are bigger. They realize their gamers are older, and that's making the games play. Nowadays, I look at games from the 70s, and it's like, oh, I don't know if I'll play this. Outside the fact that right now, playing any S&T game from the 1970s lowers the value in resale. So, all right, that's back to you.
Let's see, what would be the next one? Well, I'll give an addendum to what he just said. One thing, it's gotten better. War games have gotten better with this, but like some of the war games from the 70s and 80s, the writing was so small. If you happen to forget to bring your reading glasses, the only thing you can do is take out your telephone, point the camera at it, and try zooming in so you can read it. Which is ridiculous. They need to make the text big enough where you can at least read it without reading glasses by holding it 2 feet away or something. It's got to be big enough for that.
Everybody's saying it once. Simulations Canada, the war game company noted for it as micro print. I mean, this is the 1970s. I have to read their rules with a magnifying glass. My eyesight was much better in those days. And, one thing that's always been a joy now is that Compass Games are reprinting a lot of those, and since I can now read the rules, I'm enjoying them. I'm playing them, so the rules have to be. But I think actually today's games are written better, and they know how to put in examples. Actually, there's a complaint that it seems like the same old people are doing every game, but Well, with experience, you know how to write at least a solid game. So.
Well, it's good now that they put in the examples of play and show like the first 2 turns in the rule book and stuff. That's good. There's actually some rule books on modern games. The only reason I was able to figure out how to play the damn game is because of that section, because the actual rules they wrote down were a friggin' disaster and conflicting with each other and stuff. And so the only way I could figure out how to play was their example of play where they showed like 2 or 3 turns. Certain manufacturers notorious for that. I won't say who.
Yeah. One thing is right level of complexity. It's neither too simple or neither too complex. And sometimes it's hard to judge. Because I remember last week with Bombs Away, my complaint was that game was so simple, it was boring. And of course, we all know the problems with complex games that take forever just to play one turn.
And the rule books are not properly play tested, so there's just error after error in the rule book or conflicting information.
The problem with the simple games is that they're not well written because they're simple.
True.
I used to joke that, anytime somebody says, this game is simple, I run screaming, no, not another simple game. Actually the problem sometimes with simple games is 1 or 2 rules. You may not understand, or they're kind of vague, but that's the entire game. If you don't understand this rule, you can't play the game. So you sometimes have to make a house rule, and sometimes you're not sure if you're right or not.
True. There's been many games that I've played over the years, and to this day I'm not sure if I played it right. And from what I've heard from other people who've played the same game, they're not sure if they played it right either. The rule book was such a disaster.
One thing about complexity, we replayed the Avalon Hill Gettysburg game, one of the first war games.
That's a good game.
When I played it when I was young, we're talking high school, this was one of the most complex things I've ever played. We played it like this year after many years of war games. It was like one of the simpler games I played. I mean, I just knew it still had problems with certain squares determining what the terrain is. But other than that, it was simple to play. And so sometimes what at first looks complex may after a while become easier. And of course, sometimes if someone has a new system, it may seem more complex at the beginning. So,
gotcha. What else here? Let's talk about what makes a good solo game. There's a lot of solo games out there, which is great. It seems like there's more and more, which is really good for the hobby because most people who are in this hobby can only play solo, but one problem with some of the solo games is there's no decisions, or there's so few decisions. The game just becomes essentially a random chance game based on the die roll. There's a lot like that. The really good solo games are the ones where you actually make meaningful decisions. And of course there's randomness because you need randomness in the game. But your decisions are what win the game, whereas your die roll is not what wins you the game. It may make it easier to win, but yeah. So I would say solo games, there's got to be a reasonable amount of decisions you have to make.
Yeah. One thing is that every game should have a truly solo scenario, which sometimes you have to write all these random events and fun stuff like that. Because one of the things that makes a great game is that it's easier to start play. And if you have a scenario where you can play solo, you can go through the mechanics of it. And then, because a lot of games, even the best written ones, you got to play it once to understand what you're doing. So
there's some games though that just do not solo well. Like if it's a game where you're trying to bluff your opponent, you can't bluff yourself. So
or the block games, those are the when you got someone who knows how to play the game, those things are great. But if you don't, you have problems.
Well, the block games, most of them have hidden information, so you don't know what the block is because it's turned where the back's facing you and stuff. And games with hidden information don't play well solo.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Anything with hidden movement, hidden information, it's not for solo.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite games of all time, Starship Troopers, the scenarios that use the bugs, which are underground with the tunnels and stuff, those don't play well at all because you know where the bugs are since you're playing it solo. So, whereas if you're playing against another person, there's hidden information and stuff, so it's a lot of fun. But solo is not worthwhile.
Okay. And one thing, replayability.
Yeah, it's true.
One of the marks of a great game is that after you're done, you're saying, I want to play again. A lot of times that's one advantage of a tactical or skirmish level game, because they're easy to set up. You can play like an hour or two, and then each scenario is different, and sometimes even the same scenario plays out differently each time you play it. So it's replayability is a key thing. That's the problem I have with some of the big strategic games. Is like, okay, unless you throw in certain random events or like, World War II Europe. Well, the Allies will have overwhelming numbers unless you give like a German optional rule like jet aircraft a year early. You have no or the super submarines. Streamline submarines a year early. So, but then you determine how that would affect combat. So,
here's one thing that makes games good is if the manufacturer vets customer suggestions. Some of the customer suggestions you have are not going to improve your game. Like, let's say you have a low to medium complexity game, and then you have someone who's basically telling you you should make it super complex and stuff. Well, you got to think about that because maybe only 10% of the people playing your game think that it's not complicated enough, and the rest think the complexity is fine. So just because someone says something, don't act on it immediately. Think about it and find out if other people are having the same problem or not. I mean, I work as a software engineer, and when we're designing stuff, we go to the people we're designing it for, and they give us ideas and stuff for features, and we don't implement all the features. We look at them and we say, is anyone ever going to use this feature? And if it turns out that either 10% of the people or only 0% of the people will actually use that feature, it's a waste of time to even implement and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, suggestions are good, but you got to evaluate them, because if you just act on every suggestion and say, oh, he made a suggestion, so the next game we're going to implement that. No, don't do that. Think about it and decide if it's a good suggestion by asking other people and stuff first. That's why wargaming took such a decline in the 1980s, I think it was. The games were much simpler before that, and then the people who were writing into the magazines were the fanatics who wanted these super complicated games, and they'd listen to them, and then their sales would be less and less because the average person doesn't want to play these complex games with 30-page rule books and stuff. Most wargamers want to play something that's simple to learn and stuff. So if you listen to those guys, the guys are saying, make it more complicated, make it more detailed. Well, you're going to go out of business. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, you have to have the fine... it's not too simple, but it's not too complex.
True, yeah.
Because if it's too simple, it gets boring in its own way.
If you look at the sales numbers for war games, some of the old Avalon Hill games, which were very simple, they had super high sales numbers and stuff. And if you compare them to some of these games that came from later companies and are selling like 500 copies of the game, and they consider that a success, where Avalon Hill had some games that sold over 100,000 copies and stuff. So if you look, the games that sold the 100,000 copies were relatively simple games that anyone could learn how to play. Whereas the complex games that are selling 500 to 2,000 copies, the reason they're selling 500 to 2,000 copies is because there's only 500 to 2,000 people you're going to be able to find who are willing to invest the time to learn the game.
There's a story about Squad Leader. The first game testers, they had their hands on it. No one was excited about it. The best the developer can get was, well, it's a nice game, Well,
that's one of the few complex games that actually had good sales.
Yeah, but the thing was that based on the reviewers, the game testers, it wouldn't have been published. The thing was the developer just loved the game, so he told the publisher, let's do it. And to their surprise, they found out, well, what they found out is they had all these old guys who liked the old I move, you moves, move your divisions around. This was a whole different level of wargaming, and they just weren't used to it. And there was like a whole new young crowd that wanted to do squad leader tactical level. So.
Yeah, I mean, that game, I don't play squad. The reason being, I got nothing against it or anything. Reason being, if I'm going to have to learn that level of detail, I'd rather play a miniatures game with these awesome looking figures and terrain on the board and stuff than invest all that time in something that uses cardboard squares you move around the battlefield.
I remember it was like a good example of like, first couple of scenarios were relatively simple because you just had infantry. And then I think there was one, I forget which scenario, they introduced the first tank and it was all downhill from there. And so, so someone was complaining about, at times, I mean, you roll for breakdowns of machine guns. Well, you only have, you go roll boxcars with 2 dice. But the thing was, it was like if your machine gun breaks down in the middle of the battle, you're cooked. Mm-hmm. So it's like you did that kind of thing. Or you had to count rounds, or you had certain fatigue levels, or certain limits on whatever you do. So.
Yep. And then last thing, wargame has to be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you have the most historically accurate game you can come up with doesn't mean it's going to be fun. If the gamers find it to be boring and slow, it's probably not going to be a good seller. So you got to make sure the game's fun. Actually, I prefer it when the game designer says the number one goal I have in this game is for it to be fun, and historical accuracy is well down on the list. He's more concentrated on it being fun. Those are the games I prefer. Not everyone's like that, though. Some people are just into the historical accuracy. They don't care if the game's fun. They don't care at all. That has nothing to do with it. To them, they're simulating history, and you just don't need to have fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be fun. I mean, it just needs to simulate history well. That's all they're concerned with. So.
Yeah, I was about to say, it has to be something where you feel like you're in the same position as your historical counterpart. Now, you're playing wooden ships and Iron Men, and you have the same problem Nelson had controlling his fleet. You signal for a squadron to turn to starboard to divide the enemy line, and, well, they're not turning. They can't see the signal because of all the gun smoke in the air, and things like that.
But, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else?
That's it.
All right, guys. See you in a few weeks.